I was knee-deep in mending a fence, splintered by a rogue steer with a grudge, when a faint buzz cut through the quiet of my ranch. Looking up, I spotted a drone hovering over my land, trailing a small banner that read, "Welcome to Serenity Trail Retreat." At first, I figured it was some kid from the neighboring subdivision messing around with a new toy. But when the drone veered sharply, circling my private trail path untouched by anyone but me, my hounds, and the occasional coyote, I knew trouble was brewing. My gut churned, the kind of unease that settles in before a storm. Wiping sweat from my brow with a rag that hadn't seen soap in weeks, I set down my tools and headed toward the trail. 2 minutes in, the scene hit me like a slap. Folding chairs were scattered across my clearing, twinkling string lights draped around my ancient cottonwoods, and a fire pit sat smugly in the center, ringed with polished river rocks that screamed city money. A wooden arch stood at the trailhead, emblazoned with Serenity Trail Oasis, a nature escape hosted by your HOA. I hadn't signed off on any retreat, let alone allowed my land to be turned into some influencer's fever dream. And there, presiding over it all like a queen on a budget throne, was Laura. Not a nickname, but her actual name, Laura Hensley, president of the Pine Ridge HOA, the community creeping ever closer to my property like kudzu on a brick wall. We'd never had a real conversation, just the occasional wave at the mailbox and her unsolicited advice to repaint my shed something less rustic. Laura stood in pristine hiking boots and a mint green linen outfit, clutching a clipboard and directing a pair of hired teens to plant hammock poles right on my horse trail. She didn't notice me at first, too busy orchestrating her little utopia. I cleared my throat, loud enough to scatter a nearby squirrel, but not enough to derail her performance. When she finally glanced my way, she squinted as if I were the intruder. "Oh, Tom," she called, her voice dripping with false warmth. "We're just setting up for the guests. Swing by at 6. You'll love the acoustic duo." I didn't answer, just scanned the setup. Fresh tire tracks snaking back to the neighborhood's fence, now propped open with a makeshift gravel path cutting straight into my land. Laura sauntered over, clipboard waving like a scepter. "I hoped you'd be fine with this," she said, her tone implying I had no choice. "There's a historical easement predating your deed, something about trail access. I found it in our records. We sent a notice last week. Maybe it hit your spam." I told her no notice had arrived, no permission was given, and this was private land, clearly marked and outside her HOA's reach. She smiled, the kind of smile that says she's already decided the truth. "Don't be difficult, Tom. This is for community spirit. People crave nature, and I've sold every spot. Non-refundable." She said it with pride, like she was running a 5-star resort. I asked how much she'd charged. Her grin widened. $250 a night, all-inclusive. Wait till you see the artisanal coffee bar." I turned, taking in the scene. Composting toilets lined up by my trout stream, my tractor's hayfield route blocked by a footpath dotted with mason jars and plastic wildflowers, and a BMW parked half on my native lupins. I walked back to my house without a word, my mind racing faster than a dust devil. Laura thought she'd claimed a frontier. She didn't know she'd stepped onto the land of someone who knew every inch of his deed, every zoning law, and every county record back to the 1870s. She didn't know I'd fended off a gas pipeline 6 years ago with nothing but paperwork and a bulldog lawyer. And she didn't know I kept every map, permit, and survey in a filing cabinet under a taxidermy raccoon wearing a tiny ranger hat. I didn't shout or call the sheriff. I waited. That evening, as Laura welcomed her first guests, yoga moms and athleisure and tech bros in overpriced flannel, I sat in my kitchen with a bowl of stew and printed 3 documents. My property map, a county letter confirming no HOA jurisdiction, and a conservation permit banning structures near the stream. I tucked them into a folder labeled "For Idiots" and set it by the door. Then I fueled the tractor. Brush clearing season was here, and I had every legal right to roll through my trails with 10 tons of diesel-powered truth. The next morning, I sipped coffee on my porch, watching Laura's camp hum with brunch prep. The acoustic duo arrived, confused about why their stage was a wobbly platform on a dirt path. Laura posed for photos under a sign reading, "Embrace the Wild." A guest tripped over my irrigation line and giggled like it was charming. I checked my watch. 9 a.m. was perfect for trail work, cool enough for the engine. late enough to avoid claims of early morning malice. I pulled on my boots, climbed into the tractor, a grizzled beast with a temper, and let it roar to life. I didn't need a showdown. I needed clarity. Laura had brought a picnic to a wildfire, and she was about to feel the heat. The tractor's rumble echoed as I steered toward the trail, where my land dipped into a quiet stretch of juniper and sage. Now, it looked like a festival gone feral. Woven rugs on the dirt, lanterns swinging from branches, and a dream catcher nailed into my oldest cottonwood. I idled at the clearing's edge, watching like a rancher sizing up a flood. Laura emerged from a row of canvas glamping tents, thermos in hand, clipboard under her arm, sporting a visor and a fanny pack that had never seen dust. She was directing two college kids setting up an easel for a paint-and-sip class right on my erosion-proof trail bed. I counted 6 luxury tents for SUVs and a BMW with tires sunk into my prairie grass. Solar panels powered fairy lights, and a speaker playing yoga studio music. I backed the tractor behind the barn and went inside. No rush. This was day 1 of her operation, and I wanted it to collapse under its own weight. I spread my maps, deeds, and zoning overlays on the dining table, savoring the moment like a poker player with a royal flush. Laura's research was high school level at best. She hadn't accounted for my land's agricultural easement and wildlife corridor status, which banned commercial ventures without a county-approved impact study. She hadn't just crossed a Lanesh built a theme park on it. I made calls. First to Ray, a retired game warden who owed me for helping him corral feral pigs. I told him about a zoning and wildlife issue that might interest the county. Then I emailed drone photos to land use enforcers, labeled unauthorized private property use. By noon, Laura was giving a speech by a chalkboard titled Healing Through Trails, her guests sipping infused water on yoga mats. She spoke of reclaiming shared lands and legacy stewardship. I nearly laughed when a guest asked about picking wildflowers, and Laura waved them toward my endangered plant patch, calling it the wellness zone. That was the final straw. At noon, I drove the tractor up the trail, its growl cutting through her pan flute soundtrack. I wore my oldest cap, a stained flannel, and a look that said I wasn't here for her nonsense. Laura spotted me and marched over, clipboard raised like a shield. "Tom, turn that thing around. You're disrupting our mindfulness session," she snapped, pointing to a group breathing deeply by my well. I gestured to the trail. "This is my land. Got cedar to clear, and it's on the schedule." She shook her head like I proposed a monster truck rally. "This path is for our guided walk, complete with journaling prompts." I didn't reply. I shifted gears, rolled forward, and let the tires crush a lantern and a basket of lavender. A guest yelped, not in pain but in horror, as her vision board turned to mud. Laura ran ahead, waving her arms. "You're violating our peace. I'm calling the authorities." I cut the engine, climbed down, and pulled the conservation permit from my pocket. "Call them, but tell them you've got a commercial camp on a private wildlife corridor. They'll want your event license. And mention those toilets by the stream trout don't like surprises." Laura froze, her mouth flapping like a stranded fish. Guests whispered, "Is this private land? And did we trespass?" She yanked out her phone and stormed off, muttering about lawsuits. I climbed back in, turned the tractor, and flattened a sign reading "Zen starts here." The crunch was sweeter than fresh honey. I didn't destroy everything, just enough to block the trail and make my point. Guests started packing, rolling up mats, and hauling chairs to their SUVs. Laura paced, phone to her ear, her grip on the situation slipping like wet rope. By morning, the camp was half empty, the air thick with diesel and fading incense. Laura wasn't done, though. At 10, I saw her black SUV pull up by the HOA's gate. She stepped out with a man in a polo and khakis, clutching a clipboard and looking like he'd rather be golfing. A teen in a neon vest trailed them, carrying caution tape. They marched up the trail and taped it off like it was a crime scene. Laura faced my house, hands on hips, ready for war. I strolled over, hands in my pockets, stopping short of the tape. "This trail's closed," she declared, tapping her clipboard. "Due to hostile actions, we're restricting access for community repairs." I asked if she knew she was on private land. She didn't blink. The HOA board voted to claim this trail pending legal review. The boundaries are unclear, Her sidekick coughed. Laura, I'm not sure, but she silenced him with a glare. I pulled out my phone, showing a highlighted county map. This land, from that pine to the ridge, is mine. Deed 1897A, full rights. No ambiguity. You're not just on my property breaking the law on it. Her jaw tightened, but she doubled down. My lawyer's filing an injunction to stop your disruptions. The community demands access. I looked at her sidekick. You with her? He stared at his clipboard. I just do HOA emails. I didn't know this was contested. Laura snapped. It's not contested, it's misunderstood. I leaned in. You might want to leave before the county shows up. I've got a soil inspection at noon, and the conservation officer's bringing the permit file. They'll have questions about your signs, fire pits, and that tent platform's code violations. For the first time, she faltered. You filed a report? I nodded. Photos, coordinates, your newsletter about transforming neglected land. All documented. Silence hit like a slammed door. Her sidekick backed away. The team dragged the tape like a scolded dog. Laura tore it down and stormed to her SUV, tossing the clipboard inside. Tires spun in the gravel as she sped off. Half an hour later, a county truck pulled up. Out stepped Clara Boone, a land officer with a no-nonsense stare. We walked the trail, and I pointed out Laura's additions. Furniture bolted to tree roots, a pallet bridge, a fire ring that screamed pin arrest. Clara took photos, noting the cloudy stream runoff near the toilets. This is unauthorized commercial use, she said. If she charged money, there's a paper trail. I nodded. She sold out. That afternoon, Laura's name trended on the local Facebook page, paired with photos of her yelling at me by the tractor. Captions read, HOA Pres versus Rancher, epic fail. Comments roasted her. If I'm camping on private land, I want a tractor chase and ESMO race. I didn't post. The truth was spreading faster than a prairie fire. By evening, a notice hit the HOA bulletin board, an emergency meeting to address land missteps by certain leaders. No names, but everyone knew. A message hit my website's contact form, asking me to speak at the meeting about trail boundaries. I smirked, picturing the panic behind it, but held off replying. I had bigger plans. While Laura scrambled, I was plotting not revenge, but truth, sharp and public. The next day, a county sedan rolled up, and out stepped Ellen Riggs, a zoning enforcer who lived for paperwork. She surveyed the trail, scribbling notes by the fire ring and muttering about stream contamination. I showed her my map and the HOA newsletter advertising Laura's retreat. She forwarded it to her office. As she left, Laura's Lexus pulled up. She ignored me, beelining for Ellen with a tale of personal guests, not customers. Ellen asked if she'd filed permits. Laura floundered, citing implied access. Ellen shut her down. You need permits for private land events. Laura's face soured. That night, an HOA board member, Harold, posted online, admitting the board hadn't approved Laura's retreat and that she'd misused funds. He apologized to me, and the post exploded with complaints about Laura's past overreach, finding mailboxes, banning porch flags. The tide had turned. A reporter, Mike, asked for a comment for his story, Rancher's Revenge, HOA Power Grab Flattened. I declined, but let him walk the trail. The headline ran with a photo of me by the tractor, Laura mid-rant in the background. Calls flooded in. Laura went quiet for 3 days, then slipped a letter into my mailbox, no stamp, just her loopy signature. It was a rambling plea, claiming I'd traumatized her guests and triggered her stress condition. She begged me to drop the county claims and meet at the HOA clubhouse. I ignored it. I'd already met with my lawyer, Wade, who drafted a non-interference clause to block future HOA stunts. We added a wildlife buffer zone designation, making violations conservation crimes. The paperwork landed the day Laura hosted a reconciliation brunch at the HOA garden, inviting officials and spinning herself as a misunderstood visionary. I showed up late, dusty boots and all, carrying a folder of evidence, photos, invoices, permits, and the new agreement. The crowd hushed as I handed it to the county rep. Enough fiction, I said. Laura laughed nervously, but the rep read the documents. You charge for camping on private land, he said. That's fraud. Guests spoke up, one mentioning a $300 tent that leaked, another unaware it was private land. Laura's allies vanished. The brunch collapsed, and I walked past her without a word. She tried to speak, but choked on silence. The next day, my inbox was quiet. The trail was clear, the landmine again. Wade's order was filed, banning HOA use of my property. I pinned it in the barn by the raccoon. Laura resigned, her suit against the HOA for defamation fizzling when evidence piled up. The HOA asked me to advise on new bylaws. I helped draft a land integrity statement. This land isn't yours. This trail isn't a suggestion. Ask or stay out. Neighbors cheered. One left a pie. Another mapped my trails with his drone. Laura moved away, her fire gone. I cleared the trail's scars, the sunset blazing orange. The land didn't gloat. It breathed. So did I.